For more than 75 years, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, has been the bedrock of European security. This alliance was built on a simple, powerful promise. An attack on one member is an attack on all. At the heart of this promise has always been the immense power of the United States. America's military might, its vast economy, and its global influence have served as the ultimate guarantee of safety for its European allies. This arrangement provided a shield against threats, most notably from the Soviet Union during the Cold War, allowing Europe to rebuild and prosper under a secure umbrella. The stability that NATO offered was not just military, it was also political and economic, fostering an unprecedented era of peace on a continent historically torn by conflict. But today, on June 23, 2025, a deep sense of unease is spreading across European capitals. The long-held assumption of unwavering American support is beginning to fracture. Political winds in the United States have shifted, bringing with them a growing sentiment of America first and questions about the value of its long-standing international commitments. European leaders now listen nervously to rhetoric from Washington that suggests the US might reduce its role in NATO or, in a more extreme scenario, withdraw its security guarantees altogether. This is not just a theoretical debate, it is a live and pressing concern that forces Europe to confront a future it has long avoided thinking about, a future where it may have to stand on its own. The core of this anxiety lies in a stark reality. No single European nation can replace the United States. America's contribution to the alliance is simply too large to be filled by any one country. The US accounts for the majority of NATO's collective defense spending and provides critical military capabilities that Europe lacks, such as strategic airlift, advanced intelligence gathering, and nuclear deterrence. Its leadership has provided a clear direction and a central point of command that has unified the diverse interests of nearly 30 member states. The prospect of losing this central pillar creates a vacuum that Europe is ill-prepared to fill, raising fundamental questions about the alliance's ability to function effectively. This potential shift forces a difficult and uncomfortable conversation upon the continent. For decades, many European nations have been able to spend less on their own defense, relying on the security provided by Washington. This has been called free riding by some American critics. Now, the bill may be coming due. Europe must consider how to organize its own defense, how to fund the enormous costs involved, and most importantly, who will lead. The challenge is not merely about military hardware or budgets, it is about political will, strategic vision, and the capacity to forge a united front in the face of shared threats, all without the familiar guiding hand of its powerful transatlantic partner. In a post-American NATO, the question of leadership would become paramount. The alliance would need a new center of gravity, a nation or group of nations capable of steering the collective ship. Several countries naturally emerge as candidates, each with its own set of strengths and weaknesses. The United Kingdom, with its potent military, intelligence services, and status as a nuclear power, is a clear contender. London has historically played a significant role in European security and maintains a global outlook. However, its departure from the European Union has created political distance and mistrust with some of its closest continental neighbours, complicating its ability to lead a unified European front within the alliance. France, another nuclear-armed state with a proud military tradition and a history of advocating for European strategic autonomy, also stands out. Paris has long pushed for Europe to take more responsibility for its own security, a vision that seems more relevant than ever. President Macron has been a vocal proponent of this idea. Yet, France's push for a more independent Europe has often been viewed with suspicion by other NATO members, particularly those in Eastern Europe who see American involvement as indispensable. They worry that a French-led security structure might be less focused on the threat from Russia and more on interests in the south, such as in Africa or the Mediterranean. Then there is Germany, Europe's economic powerhouse. Berlin has the financial capacity to significantly ramp up its defense spending and build one of the continent's most powerful armies. Its central location in Europe also gives it a unique strategic position, but Germany is held back by its own history. A culture of military restraint born from the ashes of World War II makes many of its own citizens and its neighbours uneasy with the idea of German military leadership. The country is still in the process of overcoming its post-Cold War reluctance to project power and transforming its anemic armed forces, the Bundeswehr, into a capable fighting force will take many years and sustained political commitment. Finally, Poland has emerged as a serious security actor on Europe's eastern flank. Driven by its proximity to Russia and a deep historical understanding of the threat, Warsaw is investing heavily in its military, aiming to build one of the largest land armies in Europe. It has become a crucial hub for NATO operations and has earned respect for its commitment to collective defense. However, Poland lacks the economic scale and global influence of France, the UK, or Germany. Furthermore, its recent history of democratic backsliding and political friction with Brussels raises questions about its ability to unite a diverse coalition of European states under its leadership. The path for any potential European leader is fraught with immense challenges. For the United Kingdom, the primary obstacle is political. Brexit has strained its relationship with the very partners it would need to lead. Trust must be rebuilt, and London would have to prove that its vision for European security aligns with the interests of the EU 27. Financially, the UK faces its own economic pressures, which could limit its ability to sustain the high levels of defence investment required to fill the gap left by America. Its military, while highly capable, is smaller than it once was and would be stretched thin, trying to cover the vast strategic landscape of Europe without robust US support. France's ambition to lead is hindered by a credibility gap. Many allies, especially in the East, remain sceptical of its commitment to their specific security concerns. They fear that a French-led NATO would prioritize different threats and might be more inclined towards diplomatic engagement with Russia, a stance that countries like Poland and the Baltic states view as naive and dangerous. For France to lead, it must convince its partners that it is fully committed to the collective defense of the entire alliance, from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. This requires more than just rhetoric. It demands tangible actions and a consistent strategic posture that reassures its most vulnerable allies. Germany's challenge is perhaps the most profound, as it is deeply rooted in its national identity. The concept of Zeitenwende, or historic turning point, announced after Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine, signaled a major shift in policy, but implementing it has been slow. The German public and political establishment are still deeply divided over the country's role in the world. Overcoming decades of pacifist sentiment and bureaucratic inertia to build a formidable military is a monumental task. Germany must also persuade its neighbors that its leadership would be benign and collaborative, not a return to a dark past. This requires a delicate balance of demonstrating strength while constantly reaffirming its commitment to a cooperative pan-European framework. For Poland, the obstacles are related to scale and politics. While its military is growing rapidly, its economy cannot match the industrial and financial might of Western Europe. It lacks the advanced technological base and global power projection capabilities of France or the UK politically. The rise of nationalist and illiberal sentiments in recent years has damaged its standing within the European Union. Although the current government has worked to repair these relationships, lingering concerns about the rule of law and political stability could make it difficult for other European nations to accept Polish leadership. Trust and shared democratic values are the glue that holds alliances together, and any doubts in this area can be corrosive. Given that no single country can step into America's shoes, the most plausible path forward is a collective one. A leadership group, likely centered around France, Germany, and the UK, the E3, perhaps in closer concert with Poland, would have to emerge. This directorate model would pool the distinct strengths of each nation, the U.K. quote, S military and intelligence prowess, France's strategic vision and nuclear deterrent, Germany's economic power, and Poland's ground forces and eastern focus. In theory, this collective approach could create a formidable European pillar within NATO, capable of managing its own security and presenting a united front to the world. However, making such a collective leadership model work in practice would be incredibly difficult. Europe is a continent of diverse histories, strategic cultures, and national interests. Forging consensus among these powers on complex issues like defense spending, threat perception, and military intervention would be a constant struggle. Who would make the final call in a crisis? How would disagreements between Paris and Berlin or London and Brussels be resolved when time is short and the stakes are high. The institutional machinery of the European Union and NATO would be tested to its limits, and the old rivalries and suspicions that have long simmered beneath the surface could easily re-emerge without American leadership to mediate them. This complex task is made even more daunting by the shifting political landscape within Europe itself. The rise of far-right and nationalist parties across the continent presents a direct threat to the unity required for a strong European defence. These movements often campaign on platforms that are skeptical of international cooperation, hostile to institutions like the EU and NATO, and sometimes sympathetic to adversaries like Russia. If such parties were to gain power in key countries, they could paralyze decision-making, refuse to contribute to collective defense efforts, and shatter the very solidarity that a European-led NATO would depend on. Political fragmentation at home is the greatest internal threat to a strong Europe abroad. Ultimately, whether the United States fully withdraws or simply reduces its engagement, Europe has been put on notice. The era of comfortable reliance on American security guarantees is likely coming to an end. The continent must now embark on the difficult, expensive, and politically fraught process of building the capacity to defend itself. This will require not only more tanks, ships, and planes, but also a new mindset, a sense of shared purpose, and a willingness to overcome deep-seated divisions. The road ahead is uncertain and filled with obstacles, but the imperative is clear. Europe must prepare for a future in which its security rests, for the first time in generations, primarily in its own hands.